So I was excited about the concept that we were going to get this product that was going to help us organize and present quality submissions to the market. That was what I was most excited about. So with property and package coming, I know that it's going to start doing what I was so excited about early on.
And I see you smiling ear to ear, Gordon. I guess you have your old underwriter hat on right now, thinking about a quality submission. You got excited.
I did. It's so funny. I was like, I didn't say it, but you know what? You are so right. Those submissions that were fully baked, they had all the pieces in it. I mean, as an underwriter, it was like, how do I get this one off my desk? All the parts and pieces of here, let's go get it rated, right? Versus the ones if we had to chase, that's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fireside Chat. I'm excited to be hanging out with you today with some friends of mine on here that we're going to be talking about partnership, we're going to be talking about product innovation, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this conversation. I've got some people that are supposed to be smiling right now and happy, so let's just smile a little bit. I've got Gordon hanging out with us. You guys know him and love him, but he's going to introduce himself in a minute. And I've got Jordan and Shyla. We'll go ladies first. Shyla, give a quick intro to who you are so I don't butcher anything and say the wrong things here. But Shyla, you go first.
Yeah, Shyla Lankford with the Lipscomb Insurance Group out of Dallas, Texas. I am the COO as well as manage all of our support staff and marketing team.
All right. Thank you. And she's a previous guest on the podcast and she's hung out with us at Accelerate sometimes. So go back and check out that episode if you want to of the podcast, and little self-promotion and a little, thing there for you. But Jordan, why don't you jump in there next and give a little intro to yourself too?
Sure, thank you. My name is Jordan Beck. I am with Diamond Brothers Insurance out of Paris, Illinois. I am a commercial lines division manager here. I've been with the agency coming up on 10 years. So
that is awesome. And that's a future guest on the podcast. I think we figured out he hadn't been on yet, so we got to get him on there. And rounding out my main man, Gordon, over there. Why don't you talk for just a minute, Gordon, and give us a little intro to who you are for those who may be living under a rock and don't know.
I hope they're not living under a rock. Senior Director of Product Management here at Vertafore. I've spent the last 2+ decades in the independent agent channel arena, property casualty insurance. So happy to be here today. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be a little different from the standpoint of we're going to be talking about, partnership. We're going to be getting into product innovation. We're getting into some of that, but it's going to be from a different angle, guys. We're going to be talking about the back end kind of things. You're going to see a little behind the curtain on some of the conversations that Gordon's had with them and some of the product team has had. And, we at Vertafore, we pride ourselves in listening to our customers and really taking the feedback and wanting to help things get better for our agents. And these two agents right here have had a lot of work in that, had a lot of hand in some of that. So, Shyla, before we get into too much of it, on the podcast that they're going to go back and listen to, you talked about growing pretty quickly in your small business, in the commercial side of things, using our commercial submissions. Could you tell us a little bit about some of that and how you, kind of grew? I think you mentioned, which is probably larger than that now, but you got to like 1 million in production on that just through commercial submissions. I know your book's a lot larger than that, but talk to me a little bit about what that looked like and a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a niche in a particular industry sector that we write in 47 of the 50 states, and commercial submissions has been an integral part of us being able to just quickly deploy quotes, look at market aspects. As an agent, when you operate in that many states, even with a niche, it's like you can't possibly know where the market is on any given day, and it's ever changing week to week. It's like, oh, look, this week this state likes this operation, but next week they don't want it. So commercial submissions made it easy for us to go through and quickly assess not only market appetite, but competitiveness with those markets. And we're continuing that. It grows every month. We're writing new ones in that space every month.
Yeah, and that's got to be difficult as well sometimes with, moratoriums and companies pulling out of states and changing not just appetites, but changing rates and changing how they're doing business in every state. So I would imagine having something like commercial submissions really did help you a lot in that.
It does. And I'm honestly, so I've been in this industry close to 30 years in this role in this space for about the last 10. And every week when we run these quotes, I'm surprised when a market that I thought would not be competitive in that state comes back and then competitive. And without commercial submissions, I would have never known that. We would have just gone to the one we always go to. So it's also helped me keep my my carrier partnerships pleased with our production, because it does keep us from, we're creatures of habit, and it keeps us from always going to the same market with every risk, because we're running every single one of them through commercial submissions first.
Yeah, and it used to be a lot of the account managers and CSRs, they would look at something and immediately assess, like, okay, this is going to go here. This one's going to go here. And a lot of times they might be right, but there's several times that could be surprisingly wrong on that and say, oh, actually, I thought this was going to be a perfect fit for XYZ carrier, but it wasn't. And so, again, I imagine that was another great use case for you with commercial submissions.
You're
And
exactly
Jordan,
right.
I imagine a lot of those same things. I've seen you're shaking your head over there and agreeing here. Gordon, I know you're dying to talk, but I'm gonna let them talk for a little bit first. So just hang on a minute. But Jordan, I'd love to hear from your perspective on some of that as well with commercial submissions at your agency and what you guys have been able to do.
Yeah, so in the last probably 6 to 8 months, we kind of did a little small restructure, and a lot of our small business went to what we refer to as the Diamond Business Unit, or a small business unit. And so commercial submissions has been crazily impactful on just assisting that team in kind of streamlining some of the processes to get these quotes and remarkets going out the door for these smaller businesses for us. The market is still in a very shaky place at this point, and of course, we all are trying to do our best to get through the day-to-day on that. But CL Submissions has been huge in not only giving us a fast track to get multiple quotes out at one time for a client on like a remarket request, but also just giving us a home that we can take all that stuff to and start plugging and chugging away. So
Now, for the both of you, but before we get too deep into the back end of it, I would just love to know, and for the audience listening, as far as with you guys and working with, commercial submissions now, and I'm sure you guys have worked with personal lines raters, but on the commercial side, you'll have to change your workflows quite a bit and have to make some changes than that to implement commercial submissions?
we did have to change ours a bit on our end. We actually also, along with creating that Diamond Business Unit, we created a marketing team who primarily uses this product for the small business markets that come through the door for them. And basically their entire workflow changed from that standpoint, because otherwise we were reaching out to carriers, going either through their websites directly or putting together apps, loss runs, sending an email out, waiting, the whole shebang. And this really, like I said, streamlined the process for that team significantly.
Yeah, and Shyla, same thing to you. Like, what was it like beforehand, and then kind of afterwards? Once you started implementing that.
Well, it as an operations person, so efficiencies are crucial for me to make sure that we are profitable in what we're doing. And commercial submissions let us completely revamp that process. So, like Jordan said, we were going out and quoting 4 or 5 or 6 markets individually every time and rekeying all that data into their online raters. And it's just it would take all day or half a day to do one account. Now, we go in there and we start in commercial submissions. Once the customer's loaded into 360, we start in commercial submissions and process from there. And it's much less data entry, because you're only entering the information in once instead of 5 or 6 or 7 times.
Yeah, that's a huge time saver there. And Gordon, I would love for that to be the beginning, the end of the story. Like, hey, it started off beautiful, everything was wonderful, and you guys could sign up right now and there'll be no issues at all. And I know there's been some challenges along the way, and this didn't just happen overnight. I would love to hear from you, like, how did you guys get to that point? And as you've dealt with some of those challenges, what were some of those early on that you found that you maybe weren't expecting, or some of those challenges or hurdles you had to jump over?
That's a really great question. When you start thinking about trying to come at it from an operations perspective, and really we're talking about workflow, right? We're trying to get down to help users get through a process it's very tedious, because in the independent agent channel here, these agents are serving medium-sized agencies, 12 to 15 carriers, right? As you start quoting across 10, 12 carriers for one piece of risk, and you're doing multiple entries that time is huge, right? So when I think of comparative raters here, it's really coming down to the fact of like single entry, multiple carrier response, driving efficiency and effectiveness through a single application to get the agents to where they need to be. And that's a quote that has premium on it, or it might not have premium, but it also ties in appetite, right? That's probably one of the biggest things that we see in commercial lines business today, is how much appetite changes by the moment, right? what one carrier might have been doing one day, they're not doing it the next day. Back to my carrier days, one of the biggest problems when I was a commercial lines underwriter was the 3-ring binder that sits above the monitor on agent shelves, right? That was a printed appetite guide, right? And it was only good as the day that it was printed, right? So, within commercial submissions here, we're really driving appetite, desirability, as well as a real-time rate here, and probably the biggest thing that we've had to overcome here most recently was around classification, right? That process, like I go back to my days as underwriter, I had 5 or 6 manuals that laid out across my desk as an underwriter. I can't imagine what our agents were experiencing, trying to determine the same thing. So that was one of the first big hurdles that we had to jump over and really get down to the right classification leading into the risk, and then creating a workflow that made sense, right? If it doesn't make sense and it doesn't work, the users aren't going to be there.
How much, going back to those days prior to being here and in the role you're in now, how much did you tap into some of your past experience, and how much did that play into some of this? And do you still have little moments where you're, have a little PTSD?
There are. I was just chatting this morning about, I remember getting quotes, paper quotes, and what our SLA was on those paper quotes and how they would come in, and I'm like, ooh, it's very tedious too for both the carrier side and the agency side when you start thinking about the paper that's used to generate these quotes, and if they have to send them out to multiple carriers, right? So that's time on the agency side, that's time on the carrier side, and really with commercial submissions, we're really trying to drive this workflow where it is a single entry, multiple carrier response, and building the back end of the workflow to carriers to make sure that they're represented as they see fit, right? So it's not we're just going off and doing here. There is a lot of collaboration on the back end with carriers too.
And that's the other thing. And I go back to Jordan and Shyla on this, as you're actively in agencies right now. That's another challenge that you guys have to face, is you've got carriers banging on your doors all the time of like, we need submissions. I already see a head shaking. Shyla, could you talk to that for just a minute, how this has helped you guys with that area?
Yeah, as the market has shifted and changed over the last few years, many of our carrier partners are coming in and they're not so much saying, well, your production's down. They want more looks. They want more opportunities to look at accounts, not so much that they're writing everyone they're looking at. They really just want to see how many submissions are we sending in. I will warn you that commercial submissions in its fullest use will blow your submission numbers out of the water with your carrier partners. And then they're going, well, wait. What's going on? Why am I not getting more of these? And then you can have the hard conversation of, well, your rates just aren't competitive in this market space, or your coverage terms are still a little too restrictive, or things like that. But they're getting the looks that they're all looking for now that we were potentially not giving them in the past, because we weren't using a rater and we were selectively choosing who we were doing each submission to.
100%. And Jordan, as you are shaking your head there too, that changed the conversations you had with your carrier partners as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm going to echo kind of what Shyla said, but that is exactly right. We get some people who market for us and they find one or maybe two different carrier options that they really like to quote with or partner with or communicate with. And all those submissions are being driven down that one or two lines that that we're quoting with. And commercial submissions broaden that significantly. We do absolutely have the carrier saying, where are the submission numbers at? And then, like Shyla said, now they're coming back saying, why aren't we writing more of this business? And again, it's just that rate conversation, but almost identical to what Shyla was saying there.
Yeah, and again, that's a big partnership in agencies that does not need to get overlooked, is that relationship with the carrier, not just the relationship with your clients. And so, and then obviously, as we're talking in this fireside chat about the relationship with Vertafore and your tech partners, and Gordon, as you're working through these challenges, how did these two individuals come into play there, and how did that kind of start? And obviously going back to the intro here when I was talking about how much we do value our partners and our agents, what did that conversation look like for you, and how did that work out, where you got them, that buy-in to help us out and, give that feedback?
As I think of the word partnership, and that's really where we're at here, and what we're trying to go after. I have to start first with like the three-legged stool in the independent agent channel, right? So we have the agency, we have the carrier, and we have the tech providers, right? So as we've got that established and we walk in with that mindset, a lot of agents are very, very happy to help, right? And I think a lot of what it comes down to is that you have to ask for the help for us to be able to make changes and move forward, right? And I think that's really where we landed, with these two agencies, that we were very honest with ourselves and say, you know what, we need some help here, right? We have a lot of insurance knowledge here, but let's make sure, let's get down in, let's understand this workflow, right? And really, basically, pull up, spread the curtains open, right? And dive in deep here and try to figure out where are the pain points here. And I go back and talk about the industry classification, right? I mean, that was taking Jordan's team like 15 to 20 minutes, right? And then what we built and drove down in with their help, we're down to 2 to 3 minutes, right? So I think of that, in the quoting aspect, taking 15 to 20 minutes just to do one piece of an application, and you have to do this multiple times for each risk that comes in. I mean, that's the whole entire day, right? So that's not really being effective and efficient from a software perspective, right? So that was the first thing that we saw, we honed in, and with Jordan's help, and even Shyla's help here too, of sticking with us and saying, you know what, I see your changes. These are good things, right? Keep going. And her staying committed to the application really helps the conversation as we find the right path forward regarding the workflow and what the software should be doing.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of, and I say this a lot on the podcast of, time was one of the biggest currencies. There's time and there's money, but I think time's a huge currency that, gets overlooked often. And, Jordan, as we talk about shaving off time from 15, 20 minutes down to 2 or 3 minutes or however long it is now, what was that for you on that end? Like, as you and Gordon started those conversations, what were some of his early conversations like? And what were some of the biggest things that you were working with him on? And how did you feel about going through that?
Yeah, so first off, you're absolutely right. Time is extremely valuable in this industry. We all want to work hard when we're inside of these walls, but we all want to go home at some point too. People, let that weigh heavily on their shoulders of how much can I get done in a day. I will say this: during the construction of this program, one of the things that Gordon kept coming back with questions on is what makes this so user friendly, or is it user friendly? And as we're kind of going through this to help them build this product. I always kind of thought back, does it feel like a carrier website? Does it feel kind of like home to some of these people, my counterparts I'm working with? Because if they don't feel that there's ease of use there, they're not going to use it. And the only way to get the support is to make them realize, hey, this isn't that difficult. It's just, it feels like home. And so that is, Gordon kept changing and moving around and manipulating a little bit some of the different things just to give it that ease of use. And that caught on. It caught on with me initially, and that kind of just spread like wildfire. And I will say, kind of like Shyla said earlier, we're all creatures of habit. And so if we break that habit of putting stuff in, people are like, that's not for me. And I think that's kind of what was the deciding factor for a lot of folks.
Yeah, that familiarity is so key and so crucial in trying to make sure, like you said, it does feel user friendly. It does feel like it's home. And, I like the words that you use there. And I wonder, Shyla, that's some of the same thought process you had of like, does it feel like home? Does it feel familiar? Or was it different challenges for you?
No, I think it has to be easy to follow along to. It has to be intuitive. You shouldn't have to seriously hard think about what's my next step, where do I click next type mentality. And let's be honest, Gordon's probably only let me get involved with this because I'm super vocal and kept giving my opinion on things. But that's okay. I love that his team has been so responsive to us when we've given them feedback. And I joke, not just development, support is phenomenal. Like, I think I'm best buds with one of the primary support person for commercial submissions because I talk to him probably weekly because something glitches or something doesn't work right, my end, their end, whichever one it is. But they're so responsive and willing to just step in and help and see it through until it might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks before we get a resolution, because maybe it's coming from the carrier side that's causing the integration error. But there's never been a case where I've submitted something that they haven't gotten back to me and say, hey, we've got it done. Will you test it for me and make sure it's working correctly on your end? So it just has to be easy. It really does, because we are creatures of habit. We tend to go towards the ones that are easy and we know how to quote with. And there's nothing better than being able to sit down with something and just know that I'm just going to be able to click, 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 and I'm done. It works every time.
As we talk about partnership, I think obviously it's a two-way street and it's obviously something like that, but you have to feel like comfortable and be at home and feel comfortable with talking to Gordon and his team about this kind of stuff. And he had to make that part easy because it could be not intimidating, but it can be almost like, a little different or odd sometimes to be able to offer advice or offer, your feedback to a tech partner like that. Did Gordon's team, and I'm saying this right in front of Gordon, you pretend he's not there, but did he make it that easy for you? And did you feel at home and comfortable with that kind of conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. It can be scary to approach somebody who has this big giant software and they work for this big, hugely publicly traded corporation, all these things. And you're just like, but I'm just this little tiny agent with 20 employees in Dallas, Texas. What does my opinion matter? But never once did they make me feel that way. Not once did I feel like I couldn't drop an email to them or grab them, pull them aside at Accelerate or something like that and just say, can we have a quick conversation about how this is working or what's not working, more importantly?
Same thing there, Jordan, or do you have anything to add to that before we get back to Gordon?
Absolutely. They were, especially Gordon, extremely receptive to some changes, ideas, thoughts, even criticisms on some things. I was always just blown away, not only by the receptiveness, but also the action behind it. They took what you said, realized that there was a need for the application, and then, a week or two passes by, they did all their magic on the background, and next thing you know, our ideas are brought to life. And so it was just amazing to work with somebody who not only listened, but then put the action behind it.
Yeah. Talk to me, Gordon, about the intentionality in that and like what that process was for you and why that was so important to you and what happened during that time frame.
It was one of those moments, like, we said at the first part here is like when we asked for help, right? So when we said, will you help us? And we've got, positive response there. It was really coming around saying, how do we change the way that we work so that we can be very, very responsive to the feedback, and our feedback loops there were 7 days. Okay. We were meeting every single week, and every single week we were coming up with the concept. We're coming up with designs. We even had our design team involved in this too. So they were right there next to us as we were bringing these back to, to the teams here, to the agencies, I'm sorry, and then getting the feedback from them as quickly as possible, as well as our development team were building. So we were designing, building like very, very quickly and across, very, very short amount of time. We're talking 90 to 120 days here. We redesigned the whole start process. We redesigned 3 lines of business. To Jordan's point when he said it feels like home, there's a reason why, because a lot of these carrier partners sites, they all look the same way, right? Yeah, as we're quoting commercial lines business, you're all getting the same stuff, right? That the carrier needs the same things, right? So the more that we could see ourselves aligning and kind of sliding into this workflow that has been tried, true, and tested, over the years here on individual carrier sites, really said, how do we pull this in together to one? And when we started pulling those pieces in with the feedback, the quick feedback cycle, along with the development team building right away so we could see it in action, it came out with this workflow that just, it works, right? At the end of the day, you can get in, you can quote the business, you find out if there's appetite, there's premium, and you make a decision and you move along, right? I say one of the biggest things in the independent agent channel is how do we still support the multiple carrier aspect, but get in and get out, right? Because a lot of these other, we speak of exclusive agents or even direct, they only have to learn one, right? Here, this is multiple carriers, right? And multiple different products that are in play.
Yeah, and there's been, and I've been in this industry a little while, and we found out earlier that Shyla started when she was 5 years old, being in it, as long as she has. But, I've been in it for a little while myself, and there's been people that have, try other carriers, other tech partners that have tried this and done the whole commercial rater thing, and some of them have, done really well, and some of them have maybe not have. Was that a driving factor in us to be different and set ourselves apart from that on your end, Gordon? And is this one of the ways we did that, to say, we're not just going to be, some tech giant that says, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to partner with our agents. We're going to partner with our carriers and make this right.
Most definitely. at the end of the day here, like I said, with a three-legged stool, it's three of us, right? And as soon as we really went back to that concept and that philosophy, we really quickly were able to align on what is needed to solve the problem of rating commercial business, right? And we got down to it fast, and this wasn't done in any type of vacuum, like I know we're really stressing this around the partnership, but it was really done agency side, even carrier side, right? We could bring in one of our carrier partners here and they're like, yep, they did not do this in a vacuum. They were very upfront and honest with us. We talked through a lot of the changes. There are some changes that we're still deploying now that came out of the conversations with the carrier partners, right? To make sure that we're presenting their products as they should be on a comparative rater, right? And making this workflow, that makes sense to an agency.
Now, for Jordan, Shyla, was this something that went beyond you two within your own agencies where you're talking with the rest of your team and working with other people in this as well? I see you're shaking your head, Jordan.
Yeah, so Gordon and the folks there at Vertafore, they actually invited several of my different team members onto these meetings to discuss ideas, thoughts, criticisms on some different things. Again, extremely receptive of that. But it was always just an inviting feeling to bring new ideas, fresh thoughts to the conversation. Every single time, there was just never hesitation of what could we do better here, and it sparks a lot of great conversation to help it make it be the product it is.
And that's got to be fun, for your team to get involved in it. It's not just some, boring team meeting or whatever. Now you're getting to actually get in, roll your sleeves up and get to work. Shyla, you're laughing about that, but there's got to be something that resonates with that for you.
Well, it's the whole reason I volunteer through all of the different things that I do. Is who doesn't like to be involved in being able to see what happens at the end of it because of something you said in a meeting 2 months ago. Like it's a good feeling. Everybody likes it. And I have my handful of users that I know are going to give me good solid feedback that anytime we're deploying a new piece of product software, that they're my ones I go to. And I'm like, look, I'm going to roll this out to you guys first before we roll it to everybody. I need your feedback. And they never fail me because I can't do it all. I can't do them all. And because everybody works a little bit differently, it's nice to get the varying feedback from my team members because I can have 3 team members quote the same account and I get different feedback from each of them.
And that's empowering for them to be able to say, hey, I value you to be able to give me this feedback. And by the way, we're going to bring in, Gordon from Vertafore, his team from Vertafore. And so I think that's really cool, Gordon, that you brought that in to bring not just, Jordan and not just Shyla, but also their team. And I'm sure the other people that we work with as well, you bring in their teams. Again, was that something intentional? Was that a happy accident? Or was that something that just, you thought about from all along?
I think it's probably all the above, right?
Right on.
You go down and say, all right, we start one, right? And as we start discussing what we're going after, what we're trying to solve for, the net starts, getting larger and larger, and you're getting more people into it because, I think that's the one thing that we all recognize is that, I always say is that I'm never the smartest person in the room, right? It's always the people that are around me that collectively we come together and we find an amazing solution. And that's really what essentially has happened here, right? We all came together, we brought all of our superpowers, right? And we said, this is what we're going after. And then we were able to go and solve for that problem, right? And really make a workflow that made sense and did not, trip anyone up. It really helped both both the agencies get through this without feeling like we moved the cheese too far, right? Because that's never the goal. Like I always say, you can just slightly turn cheese and you get huge results, right? Yes, we did move a little bit of the cheese, right? But the cheese, when we moved the cheese, we made it more aligned to what is normalized out in the commercial lines quoting space, right? So we kind of fell more in line with that. And that's why, as the two teams here started working with the application, they were able to easily, it felt like home, right? Because it aligned more to what they're accustomed to.
So, we've talked about the workflows and the saving the time and some of the stuff there in the background there with some of that. Was there any other challenges you wanted to hit on, before we start talking about, what's next for commercial submissions? Or did we catch it all?
I think
I'm going to take your silence as we caught it. What's coming up next now with commercial? What's some of the things you're working on now that you can maybe talk about and maybe they're involved in, or, maybe you're looking for more feedback from, from some other users and whatnot too. What are some things coming out next?
So as we've looked at the workflow here and working with both the agencies here, one of the quick things that we've realized here, and we've kind of known all along, but it goes back to that saying, you know what, we have to address the elephant in the room here, is that not all carriers offer the same type of BOP, right? The BOP that I underwrote had a revenue ceiling of $2 million. It was only 105 classes deep, right? But that was specific to my carrier, right? And there are so many other carriers out there where their BOP appetite is so different, right? So as we've talked with both Jordan and Shyla here about what we're running into, is that we really didn't have a great way if a BOP broke. And when I say broke, it's really there was not appetite for that as a BOP line of business. So we really started to say, hey, well, what's that answer? And really the answer is package, right? And when I talk about a package risk, I'm talking about the foundational lines of that is general liability and property, right? So we have general liability today. That's up, it's in the wild, it's being used. It's actually one of the lines of business, the workflow that we changed, that they have been using here. But one line of business we did not have was property, right? And property is very, very complex. Just the sheer nature of it when you start thinking of what we're insuring here, right? And both Shyla and Jordan have been instrumental in helping us say, all right, this is what we should be going after, right? And this is how in our minds makes sense from a workflow perspective. We thought that we were going to be very, very heavy on a screen. When I say heavy, I mean like really a lot of questions asked, a lot of data attributes, and the feedback was like, nope, this is what we expect when we start talking about the property line of business, which was great to hear, but also in the same breath, it was like, holy cow, this is huge, right? So we had to find better ways to structure what we're being asked and when in the workflow so that it doesn't feel heavy to the user, right? But we're still getting all those pieces of data. So property's in the works, right? Once we get property built, we're going to come back through with a package, right? We really need to be able to help agents go from when a BOP is not in appetite for a carrier. How do we get that data set that has been entered in a BOP, get it over to a package, and allow the user to go ahead and round out the data attributes that are needed to support a package, and then get it off to a carrier for a quote. I would even go as far as saying that we're really trying to align both BOP and package in parallel, because like I said at the start here, each carrier is different in their appetite on their BOP product. So,
and Jordan, Shyla, as we're, developing some of that with the property, obviously we all know, property can be very complex, and especially depending on where you are in the country. But what are some of those things that, back in as he's, y'all been talking through that, is there some of that conversation that you could, talk about just a second before we start to wrap up? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Property, it's just the complexity of property itself is kind of what's turned this entire market upside down, right? And so it is a daily challenge. It is a daily struggle. Of course, we've had a lot of conversations with Gordon about some of the futures to come with that and helping build that product. Property is not the beast that I like to tackle on a very regular basis, if I'm being honest. So if they can put the work in and make that a streamlined product and a great avenue for us to use, it's going to be an even bigger game changer than what we already currently have.
Shyla, are you more of a property driven agency using that much more?
We are very property driven, and we're unfortunately in one of those very challenging property states as our primary state. But for me, the concept that this is, and this was initially when Vertafore first started talking about commercial submissions, the small business piece of it, I was not super excited about, because at the time I didn't have the little niche program, but I got excited about that later. I was excited about what was coming in the future. And they were already at that point talking about the package submissions and the middle market, if you will, submission base. And that was really what I was excited about, because as an agent, our submissions need to be consistent at coming from the firm. Are we presenting quality submissions to our markets, giving them good data? Because those quality submissions that tell a good story go to the top of the list, versus the one where we're piecemealing information together and maybe we're sending 5 emails, and those are going to get buried and all those emails get lost because we all get hundreds of emails a day. So I was excited about the concept that we were going to get this product that was going to help us organize and present quality submissions to the market. that was what I was most excited about. So with property and package coming, I know that it's going to start doing what I was so excited about early on.
And I see you smiling ear to ear, Gordon. I guess you have your old underwriter hat on right now, thinking about a quality submission. You got excited.
I did. It's so funny. I was like, I didn't say it, but you know what? You are so right. Those submissions that were fully baked, they had all the pieces in it. I mean, as an underwriter, it was like, how do I get this one off my desk? All the parts and pieces of here, let's go get it rated, right? Versus the ones, if we had to chase, that's time, right? So
Sure.
as I come over here and think about commercial submissions, if I can build this workflow that has all the parts and pieces in it that produces a quality submission, I bet it is real time, right? So we're hitting APIs here. My hope is that the results coming back to the agency from the carrier, it's a good rate, right? And then
Sure.
when the agencies go and sell this rate to the consumer, hey, you know what? We can take it to the bank. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the one thing I think that we can all ground on here is that if we're quoted something and then it changes, ooh, that hurts.
100%.
The
But
quality.
that's also where that quality submission comes in, and you know all the facts, you know all the things. It's organized, it's put together, it's at the top of the stack, which is where everybody wants to be, right underneath Shyla and Jordan. But we get right there at the top, and that's huge. And so I love that you're able to put that hat back on and get all excited about it. So go ahead, Shyla.
I was going to say, Heath, I want our team and our firm to have that reputation in the industry with our underwriting partners and carrier partners that we are going to give them quality submissions time after time after time. And this tool is going to allow us to be better at what we already are hopefully doing a good job at, but we can always be better. And I'm excited about this tool being able to help us do that.
Well, yeah, and that being said, you know that again, having that partnership to be able to help you to align and reach those goals that you have for you and your agency has got to be huge. And so, you know, to echo and to continue off that, you want to continue into that, and then I'll move on to Jordan from that. If you want to talk to that a little bit, having that partnership to help you align with that goal. Correct, Shyla?
Yeah, I mean, it's only going to help us be better with our carrier partners, and that's all we ask for.
You know, again, you know, for you, Jordan, I mean, having a partnership with Gordon and Vertafore and that, you know, I'm guessing you probably have similar goals of trying to, you know, have the great submissions, have the quick turnaround, all the things like that, and having that partnership's got to be big for you as well.
Absolutely. And I one of the things that really resonated with me through this entire process is, and I kind of go back to what we said earlier, is the action behind the things that we're suggesting. And I believe that, you know, that continued support from their end on us of what does it look like that's going to make this a success story is going to help us drive, well, not help us, but help Vertafore drive that to be the successful product that it is. So that partnership, I can't say enough great things about it, but it's one that is so inviting that I look forward to the conversations to come down the road just because I know how much of a success it was prior. So
that's awesome. And so, Gordon, you know, as you move through some of this stuff, and we're wrapping up this fireside chat, talk to me a little bit about the ones that are listening right now, other agents that want to get involved, or other people that may want to submit their feedback, or if there's anything particular that you wanted to you know, elicit feedback from, or look for feedback on, you know, what could that be? And talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we definitely have you know, a great NetView association that we're right close to. They have Incom out there. I watch it. And you can ask Shyla that too. You know, I've reached out many times, comments are made, you know, I reach out to her, hey, you know, so we do have that avenue. We also have our ideas portal, you know, so we do monitor that very, very closely. And honestly, at the end of the day here, if there's another agency out there that wants to have the conversation, I'm always open to it, right? I think at the end of the day here, you know, the software that's being built is only as good as the partnership that's behind it, right? So as we go forward here, this is not one and done, right? You know, Jordan's going to have a direct line if it's just talking about Oreos, or if it's actually talking about commercial you know, business that we've got to talk through. Even Shyla too, you know, pink hair, we can do that too. The tinsel, right? I'm in, we'll have a conversation. Or if it's commercial lines, right, we'll talk about it. Or anything rating, you know, I'm definitely here, definitely encourage those conversations, because like I said, at the end of the day here, you know, the software is a software. It's the partnership that's behind it that makes it truly what it is, and how we continue to keep driving it forward.
Awesome. And again, I've loved this conversation, and thank you all so much for joining me today and letting me just have a front row seat to this incredible conversation. And I've truly enjoyed it, and I love watching these partnerships, and I love seeing, this kind of innovation and these kind of things happen. So again, thank you guys so much, and to the audience that's listening, and watching this right now, thank you guys for joining us, and feel free to reach out. Gordon, what's a way, I mean, besides chats, is there a way they could reach out, or is there an email address you could give them, or something like that? All right.
So usually probably what we'll start in is with ideas too. Email is a dangerous proposition. That is
There you
dangerous.
go. Perfect.
With the ideas portal, it's more than just
Okay.
me at it. So, definitely that, or even your account manager, right? They all know
Oh, that's a good one too.
They know how to get a hold of me. More than happy to jump on a call, with the account manager in any agency and have the conversation too.
So guys, feel free to jump into those ways of communicating, get in touch. And thank you again for joining us on this Fireside Chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you on another one.